Have you ever wondered what secrets lie buried beneath the glorified tales of the Roman Empire? The shocking truth about the last days of Rome involves a young boy whose life story has been deliberately erased from our history books. This isn't just another historical account. It's the horrifying reality of how power corrupted even the most sacred aspects of human dignity. Issa never expected that her routine archaeological dig would uncover scrolls that would forever change her understanding of history. As she carefully translated the ancient Latin text, her hands began to tremble. The personal account of Antinous, the last imperial pleasure boy, revealed a system of exploitation so disturbing that historians had deliberately concealed it for centuries. What she discovered would shake the foundations of everything we thought we knew about one of history's greatest civilizations. The practice of keeping young boys for pleasure wasn't just accepted in ancient Rome, it was institutionalized within the highest levels of power. By the late Empire period, these children were systematically trained from as young as 7 years old, taken from conquered territories and distant provinces, where their disappearances wouldn't raise questions. They were considered living luxury items, less than human in the eyes of Roman law, and completely at the mercy of their powerful owners. The training facilities were disguised as educational academies for gifted children, promising parents a better future for their sons through service to the empire. In reality, these compounds were essentially prisons where children were molded into perfect companions for the elite. The boys were taught languages, music, poetry, and the art of conversation, alongside more sinister skills designed to please their future masters. Discipline was harsh, and escape attempts were punished with extreme cruelty to discourage others from trying. Most troubling of all, historical records show that by the late Empire, the average life expectancy of these pleasure boys was just 19 years. Antinous was different from the others, born not to conquered peoples, but to a Roman citizen of modest means who fell into debt. His father sold him to cover family debts when he was just 9 years old, believing the boy would become a household servant to a wealthy family. The contract, which Issa found preserved alongside the scrolls, specified total ownership with no limitations on use. The document bore the official imperial seal, indicating this transaction wasn't just legal, but sanctioned at the highest levels of Roman society. The price paid for the child was astronomical, equivalent to what a skilled tradesman might earn in 15 years. The contract included clauses forbidding the boy from ever marrying, having children, or owning property. Effectively, Antinous ceased to exist as a person under Roman law from the moment the document was signed. His future would be decided entirely by the whims of his new owners, and his family was prohibited from ever contacting him again, under penalty of death. The boy's extraordinary beauty was noted repeatedly in the documents, with disturbing attention to detail that made Issa pause her translation several times, needing breaks to process what she was reading. Blue eyes were exceptionally rare in Rome, and Antinous had eyes the color of the deepest Mediterranean waters. His hair was described as spun gold, and his skin unmarked and fair as Italian marble. These features, unusual in the Mediterranean world, made him especially valuable. Unlike other pleasure boys who served multiple masters, Antinous was purchased specifically for the exclusive use of Senator Gaius Petronius, one of the most powerful men in Rome during the final decades of the Western Empire. Petronius was known for his extreme cruelty and outsized influence over the increasingly unstable emperors of this period. Historical records confirmed he had gone through at least 7 previous pleasure boys, none of whom survived beyond their 18th year. Issa's heart sank as she read Antinous' first-person account of his arrival at Petronius's vast estate outside Rome. The boy described being stripped, examined like livestock, and immediately locked in a special chamber adjacent to the senator's bedroom. The rooms were luxurious, decorated with precious stones and the finest artworks, but the windows were barred and the doors could only be unlocked from the outside. The scrolls detailed how the senator would visit the boy daily, sometimes bringing friends to admire his new acquisition. Antinous wrote that he quickly learned to dissociate during these visits, describing how he would mentally transport himself to memories of his family's small farm while his body remained present. This psychological survival technique would become crucial as the years passed. Several passages described how he was forbidden to speak unless spoken to, and how he was expected to anticipate the senator's needs before they were voiced. Any failure to please resulted in punishments that the boy described in heartbreakingly matter-of-fact terms. The most disturbing aspect of Antinous' writings was how the initial trauma gradually gave way to resignation. As months became years, the boy's entries showed less emotion and more mechanical descriptions of his days. He detailed the elaborate beauty routines imposed on him, hours spent each day being bathed in perfumed waters, having his skin treated with expensive oils, and being dressed in the finest silk garments that cost more than what most Romans earned in a year. Every aspect of his appearance was controlled, from the precise arrangement of his hair to the scents he was required to wear. The scrolls revealed that he was fed a carefully controlled diet, designed to maintain his youthful appearance as long as possible. Certain foods were imported at enormous expense specifically for him, while others were strictly forbidden. His sleep was regulated to prevent dark circles under his eyes, and he was never allowed outdoors without extensive protection from the sun to keep his skin pale and unmarked. By his 14th year, Antinous had become something of a legend in Rome's elite circles, a living status symbol for Senator Petronius. The scrolls described how the senator would showcase the boy at exclusive gatherings, allowing selected guests to admire but never touch his prized possession. Antinous wrote about these events with a disturbing detachment, noting how he was displayed like a rare statue, while politically powerful men discussed matters of state around him. He was dressed in transparent silks, adorned with gold thread and precious stones, with his face painted in the latest fashion. These appearances were carefully staged, with Antinous positioned on specially designed couches or platforms where the gathered elite could admire him from every angle. The boy was trained to maintain perfect stillness for hours, something he described as becoming furniture in human form. During these gatherings, the senator would often boast about the enormous sum he had paid for Antinous and the special treatments he provided to maintain the boy's beauty. The scrolls revealed a turning point in Antinous' 15th year when he began to realize the fate that awaited him. He described discovering a hidden burial ground on the senator's estate where he counted at least 7 small marble markers bearing only dates, no names. When he secretly asked an elderly kitchen slave about these graves, he learned they contained the previous pleasure boys who had served the senator. None had lived past their 18th year. Some had died from the physical abuse they endured, others from poisoning when their looks began to fade, and at least 2 had taken their own lives. The kitchen slave warned Antinous that the senator had already begun commenting that his current favorite was ripening too quickly, a phrase he had used shortly before the disappearance of previous boys. This revelation transformed something in Antinous' mind. His writing changed dramatically after this discovery, showing the first signs of a plan forming. He began paying close attention to the political conversations he witnessed, no longer mentally escaping, but instead absorbing every detail that might prove useful. Isa was amazed by the brilliant strategy that began to unfold in the later scrolls. Antinous described how he started to subtly insert himself into the senator's political life, first by appearing to accidentally overhear useful information, then by carefully positioning himself as indispensable. He memorized names, dates, and details of the senator's illegal dealings and secret political alliances. He learned to read upside down, silently scanning documents on the senator's desk while performing his expected duties. The boy developed a system of hidden marks to record what he learned, disguising his notes as decorative patterns. In small craft projects he was permitted as entertainment. Most ingeniously, he began cultivating relationships with the household slaves, trading his relatively privileged position to secure their loyalty. He convinced the senator to allow him to distribute leftover food and old clothing to the servants, positioning himself as their benefactor. This network would prove crucial in what was to come. All the while he maintained the perfect facade of the obedient pleasure boy, never giving Petronius any reason to suspect the calculating mind developing behind his beautiful exterior. As Rome's political situation deteriorated in the final years of the empire, Senator Petronius became increasingly involved in dangerous conspiracies. The scrolls detailed how he hosted secret meetings with generals planning to overthrow the current emperor, meetings where Antinous was present but ignored, considered no more significant than the furniture. This proved to be the senator's fatal mistake. Antinous documented every conversation, every name, and every detail of the planned coup. As his 17th birthday approached, the age when most of his predecessors had met their end, he prepared to use this information. The boy had spent years cultivating a specific connection with a merchant who supplied rare goods to the household. This merchant had regular contact with the imperial court and owed his position to the emperor's favor. Through elaborate means that demonstrated remarkable ingenuity, Antinous managed to pass his detailed records of the conspiracy to this merchant, who immediately recognized their value and delivered them to the emperor himself. The consequences were swift and devastating. The imperial guard stormed Senator Petronius's estate in the middle of the night. The scrolls described the scene in vivid detail, how the senator was dragged from his bed, how he begged for mercy, and how his eyes widened in shock when he realized the source of his downfall. "He looked at me then," Antinous wrote, "truly looked at me for perhaps the first time, seeing not the beautiful object he had purchased, but the human being who had destroyed him." Petronius and all the conspirators were executed the following day in the Roman Forum. Their properties were confiscated, their names struck from public records, and their families exiled to the furthest reaches of the empire. In a final twist that Issa found particularly satisfying, the emperor, grateful for the information that had saved his rule, granted Antinous his freedom and a small property in the countryside, far from Rome and its painful memories. The final scrolls revealed that Antinous' story didn't end with his liberation. Free but deeply traumatized, he struggled to build a normal life after years of captivity and abuse. He described nightmares that plagued him and the difficulty of forming normal human connections after being treated as property for so long. "I flinch when anyone comes too close," he wrote, "and cannot bear to be touched without warning, even in kindness." He detailed his efforts to learn useful skills that could sustain him, working first as a scribe, due to his beautiful handwriting, then gradually establishing himself as a teacher of languages and literature. His writing showed a person piecing himself back together, reclaiming his humanity day by day. Perhaps most poignantly, he described his first friendships as a free man, tentative, awkward connections formed with neighbors who knew nothing of his past. These relationships, though challenging for him, seemed to provide the healing his spirit needed. Issa was particularly moved by the scroll that described Antinous' decision to document his experiences. "I write this not for myself," he explained, "but for those who might come after me, those who even now suffer as I once did. Let my words stand as testimony that survival is possible, that the human spirit can endure unimaginable cruelty and still find its way back to the light." He detailed how he had saved for years to purchase the finest parchment and inks, determined that his account would survive the centuries. He entrusted the completed work to a sympathetic priest who promised to preserve it in a temple archive. The boy, who had once been valued only for his beauty, had transformed himself into a chronicler, ensuring that the hidden horrors of Rome would not remain buried forever. His final entry expressed the hope that future generations would build more just societies where no child could be legally owned and exploited as he had been. Issa spent months verifying the scroll's authenticity, consulting with leading historians and linguistic experts. Every test confirmed what she already knew in her heart. These were genuine first-century documents, preserved by a series of remarkable coincidences through the collapse of Rome and the chaos that followed. The implications were enormous, challenging established understandings of Roman social structures and raising uncomfortable questions about how history sanitizes the past. Several of her colleagues urged her to limit publication of the findings, arguing that they would undermine public admiration for classical civilization. Others suggested that the accounts were too disturbing for general audiences and should be restricted to specialized academic publications. Issa rejected these arguments completely. "History isn't meant to make us comfortable," she insisted during a particularly heated debate. "It's meant to teach us truth, especially the truths we'd rather not face." Religious institutions that had long idealized aspects of Roman civilization issued statements distancing themselves from these regrettable practices. Most significantly, the revelations sparked renewed examination of other historical periods and cultures, with scholars worldwide beginning to ask what other abuses might have been systematically erased from our collective understanding of the past. Public interest was intense and immediate. Issa found herself giving interviews, lectures, and presentations to audiences ranging from university students to historical societies. People seemed hungry for this unvarnished truth, this glimpse behind the marble facade of ancient Rome. Many expressed anger that such history had been hidden, while others thanked Isa for finally giving voice to the voiceless victims of the past. In the years that followed, Antinous' account became required reading in university history courses worldwide. Isa continued her work, establishing a foundation dedicated to uncovering and publishing other erased histories, the experiences of those marginalized and silenced by traditional historical narratives. The foundation sponsored archaeological digs, specifically targeting sites likely to contain documents from society's lowest ranks rather than its elites. This approach yielded remarkable results, with new discoveries regularly challenging conventional historical wisdom. Most importantly, Antinous' story inspired a new generation of historians committed to examining the past with unflinching honesty. His words, preserved against all odds for nearly 2,000 years, had finally found their audience. The boy who had been purchased as an object had in the end changed how humanity understands its own history. When interviewed about the personal impact of her discovery, Isa often reflected on the final passage she translated from Antinous' scrolls. "In my darkest moments," he had written, "when the senator believed he owned not just my body but my very soul, I would silently repeat to myself, 'This too shall pass. I will outlast this man. My truth will outlast his power.'" Those words had sustained him through unimaginable suffering, and now, centuries later, they had proven prophetic. While Senator Petronius was remembered only as a footnote in the story of Rome's fall, Antinous' voice echoed across the millennia, finally heard and honored. This, Isa believed, was the true power of historical research, not to glorify empires or emperors, but to recover the humanity of those whom history had forgotten. In Antinous' courage and resilience, modern readers found inspiration for their own struggles against exploitation and injustice. The most unexpected outcome of Isa's discovery came in the form of legal reform. Legislators and human rights advocates worldwide began citing Antinous' story when arguing for stronger protections for children and more effective measures against modern human trafficking. "The mechanisms of exploitation have changed," noted one prominent advocate, "but the fundamental abuse of power remains the same." Several countries incorporated case studies based on the scrolls into training programs for law enforcement officers working to combat trafficking and exploitation. Isa found this development particularly meaningful. The idea that a boy who had suffered 2,000 years ago could help protect vulnerable children today seemed like a form of justice that transcended time. She often thought about how amazed Antinous would be to know that his words, written in desperate hope, had indeed reached across the centuries to create positive change. The controversy surrounding Isa's work never fully subsided. Each new paper she published on the subject attracted both acclaim and criticism. Some academics continued to resist the implications of her findings, preferring a more sanitized view of classical civilization. Others built upon her research, expanding our understanding of the hidden aspects of ancient Roman society. The debate itself became an important part of how historical methodology evolved in subsequent years, with scholars increasingly questioning whose perspectives were being privileged in traditional historical narratives and whose were being erased. Museums began revising their exhibitions on Roman civilization, incorporating information about the exploitation that underpinned its luxurious lifestyle. Documentaries explored the lives of the enslaved people who made Rome's grandeur possible. A profound shift occurred in how the public understood this ancient society, moving from uncritical admiration to a more complex and honest assessment. As years passed and her work gained wider acceptance, Isa never forgot the moment she first unrolled those ancient scrolls and saw Antinous' careful handwriting. That moment had transformed not just her career, but her understanding of history's purpose. "We don't study the past merely to admire it," she explained in her best-selling book on the discovery, "but to see it clearly, with all its achievements and its horrors fully acknowledged." This approach demanded emotional as well as intellectual honesty, the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about societies we had been taught to revere. The response from readers worldwide confirmed that many people were ready for this more mature relationship with history. Letters poured in from those who found the story disturbing but necessary, who felt that understanding the darkest aspects of human civilization helped illuminate the ongoing struggle for justice and dignity in the present. Ultimately, the story of Antinous and Isa's discovery of his scrolls transformed into something neither of them could have anticipated, a powerful symbol of how buried truths eventually find their way to the light. Historians began to speak of Antinous moments, those revelations when long-suppressed aspects of the past suddenly become visible, forcing re-evaluation of established historical narratives. Documentary filmmakers created award-winning features exploring both the ancient story and its modern discovery. Artists produced works inspired by Antinous' journey from exploitation to agency, from object to author. In university classrooms worldwide, students debated the ethics of historical research and the responsibilities historians bear toward those whose lives they study. All of this stemmed from one boy's determination to record his truth and one archaeologist's courage in sharing that truth with the world. Together, separated by 2 millennia, they had changed how humanity understands its past. On the 10th anniversary of the scroll's discovery, Isa returned to the site where they had been found, a forgotten storage room in what had once been a provincial Roman temple. Standing in the cool darkness, surrounded by the echoes of ancient voices, she felt a profound connection to the boy whose words had so changed her life. In his final entry, Antinous had written, "Perhaps someday someone will find these words and remember that I existed, that I was more than what was done to me." Isa had done more than remember. She had ensured that his courage would never be forgotten. As she traced her fingers along the ancient stone walls, she whispered a promise to Antinous and to all those whose stories remained buried. "We will keep digging. We will keep listening. We will honor your truth." And in that moment, the distance between past and present seemed to dissolve, revealing the unbroken thread of human experience that connects us all across the centuries.